Hello. Welcome to the Raise Your Volume Academy podcast. I'm Tiffany Kane, your host, and it's been a minute. I know I probably have not recorded an episode in close to a month, and I'm here today to tell you why. Pretty tragic thing happened in my family that threw all of us for a loop and made it really hard for me to release any of the episodes that I had recorded previously or to continue recording. Sometimes you just have to work through things before you can share them. And so I wanted to talk to you today about that and what happened and why I think it is so poignant and so important for the Raise Your Volume Academy, the Revas in this group, to hear about what happened and for us to rally together to make a change. Now, warning, there is a trigger warning that goes with this. So I do want you to know right now, trigger warning, I will be talking about domestic violence and I will be talking about the loss of life, specifically murder. So if that is going to be very hard for you to listen to, then please feel free to not listen. And in fact, probably for the next several weeks, this will be the topic. And so you may want to decide, do I want to listen to these episodes or not for the next few weeks? It's entirely your choice. I fully respect if you feel these are topics you do not want to listen to. Okay. I'm going to do my best to get through this without crying, but I can't guarantee. So early September, on a Saturday morning, I wake up to my partner getting a call from his mother. And I could tell from the sound of his voice that this was the kind of call nobody wants to get. You know, you can tell from somebody's body language, just the way they're almost a sizzling silence, right? As he's listening to her. I could not hear what his mother was saying, but I could just tell from his body language and the sizzling silence that he was hearing something horrible. And sure enough, the horrible thing that he heard was that his sister had been murdered by her ex-husband in a terrible, violent act of domestic violence. And there's really no other way to put it. It is a murder. And it took him a while to recognize that it was a murder. And it wasn't until I said, your sister was murdered. This is huge, that it really, really struck him and really hit him and let him, it's a whole different thing to process. And I have to tell you, grief has so many layers and there are so many different types of grief. You know, I lost my best friend to breast cancer, and losing somebody that you love to a terrible disease that ravages their body has a type of grief that is devastating, watching somebody you love be destroyed. I've lost grandparents, right? And watching, you know, again, somebody you love die is full of grief. But, you know, when it's an elderly person and they've lived a full life, there's a certain sweetness to that grief, a certain celebration of life that can happen with that grief because they've lived a long life. I have lost a cousin that was more like an aunt and a brother-in-law to suicide. And that has a terrible type of grief because there is that, is there something I could have done differently? It is the so tragic that somebody felt so desperate that they needed to take their own life, you know, and that comes with its own grief. So there's so many layers of grief, and I've experienced a lot of them. I've got to tell you, this one hit us differently. I think there's just so many layers. There's the layer of anger of, her ex-husband killed her. And so there's that layer of anger. Now, thankfully, he got caught almost right away and put in jail. So he's not out there, hurting anybody else. But, there's anger. And this is going to be a prolonged process. There's going to be, a criminal case and possibly a civil case. And so there's lots of court time that is going to be in the future. And then, will he be up for parole and just all of that stuff? There is the tragic and sudden loss of a family member. And she was a mother of 7 children. And so there's the loss of all the children losing their mother, and just so much tragedy. And then the events surrounding this that were so incredibly tragic. Just a few months prior, one of her, her second son, committed suicide. And so the family was reeling from that tragedy, right? And the day that she was killed was also her daughter's wedding. So there's also the daughter didn't get to have her mother or her father come to her wedding. Her father's in jail for killing her mother. And her brother couldn't be at her wedding because he committed suicide. So you can imagine my partner's niece and her devastation. So you can see just all the way around. It's been a lot to process. And then for me personally, watching somebody I love and being there by the side of somebody I love go through all these emotions and figuring out how to be the best partner possible to help him through, to be there in the turmoil of all these emotions and with everybody processing them very differently. Every family member processed their feelings about this differently. And then for me as well, there's the domestic violence piece. I'm such a huge advocate for women's rights. I'm a huge advocate for raising our volume against injustices. And I myself left a marriage because of severe toxicity and abusive behavior. And so then, of course, there's the personal triggers on my side of just all the stuff that came up for me. So it took me a long time to come back to the podcast and share the story. Now, there's a lot of gory details that I'm not going to share. I will let you know this was a very violent act, a very tragic act. And the police have charged him, the perpetrator, the ex-husband, with premeditated murder. He obviously put a lot of thought into what he was going to do. This was not an act of quote unquote passion. And it was horrible. And so I'm not going to go into all of those details about that, but suffice it to say that a woman unnecessarily lost her life from an act of violence by a man that she trusted. It was her ex-husband. And yes, it was her ex-husband, but they were actually living together. Relationships are complicated. They were living together. For the next few weeks, I'm actually going to be exploring domestic violence and toxic relationships. It's a 360 moment for me. When I started podcasting, my podcast was more about relationships. It was called Love and Life After Divorce, and it was navigating life and love and relationships after divorce. And like I said, I came from a toxic, abusive relationship. And so a lot of my topics I talked about were, how do you heal from that? How do you recover from that? How do you identify those things so you don't get into that kind of relationship again? I haven't talked about relationships for years, but I think it's time. It is fitting as well because October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And it's important for us to be aware. And I think it fits in the Raise Your Volume. I know it fits in the Raise Your Volume theme because we have got to raise our volume against violence against women. We have to. Intimate partner violence is pervasive and it's terrible and it kills so many women, 3 women a day, and it hurts even more women and children. I'm not going to get into all the statistics and numbers today. That's going to be a different episode. But for the month of October, I will be talking about some of these things. I'm going to re-release a few past episodes where I was talking to experts about domestic violence and toxic relationships. I will be recording some episodes that talk about resources, that talk about maybe the roots of why domestic violence is so pervasive, where this comes from, and how we can fight it. I will be doing episodes in the future about all of those things. Today, I just wanted to reconnect with you. I wanted to tell you why it has taken so long. I will also tell you that these episodes are going to be fairly raw. My editors are my partner and his brother. We own an editing business, and usually they edit my podcast episodes. I am not going to ask them to edit these episodes. And so you're getting me in the raw, unedited form. So if this doesn't sound like the high quality you're used to from me, that's why. Just wanted to let you know I'm not going to put them through listening to all of this. My little gift to them is I'm going to handle all of the editing myself. I want to thank you so much for being here with me today. Thank you for being so patient with it taking a while for me to get some episodes out. Thank you to the incredible amount of love and support that this community has poured on me and my partner, David. You've just, the messages, the DMs, the emails, the love that has poured out to us has been beyond incredible. We're still getting messages and we're just so grateful, just so appreciative. It's hard to respond to them all. Some days are harder than others. I will tell you, this weekend it was rough. This was a rough weekend. I think I took 4 or 5 naps over the course of this past weekend. We just were working through a lot. And thankfully today I feel ready. I feel ready to record. And I'm hoping that soon David will feel ready and we'll be able to do an episode together so that you can hear from him what this is like and how he would like us to raise our voices. What does he think would be helpful? So let's come together. Let's raise our voices for taking the time that we need to take to process. Let's raise our voices for being there in solidarity and community and offering support as you guys did, as this beautiful community did. Let's raise our voices against violence. Let's raise our voices against that. Let's raise our voices against all of the social structures that breed the perfect storm of circumstances that allow domestic violence to be so pervasive. We're going to talk about those things in a future episode. But we're going to raise our voices against all of that. And we're going to raise our voices in solidarity and in coming together and in supporting our sisters. And instead of saying to another woman, why are you staying in that situation? What is wrong with you? Why are you staying there? Any self-respecting woman wouldn't be in that situation. Instead of saying that to a fellow woman, we are going to say, how can I help you? How can I support you? You deserve better. How can I get you out of that? What help do you need from me? How can I be there for you? And we're going to do that instead of judging. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Please share this episode. Share it around. It's been a while since I've recorded. And so you sharing this episode with somebody else lets them know that I'm back on the air. And make sure that you hit follow in your podcast player so that you will be able to hear all of the updates that are coming out this month as I talk about domestic violence awareness and what we can do and how we can raise our volume against it. Thank you so much. Remember to raise the volume of your voice. I'm listening.